Hello and welcome to Sleepsmyth, your peaceful place to unwind, dream and drift gently into sleep. Before we start our story tonight, let me help you settle in with a simple, calming breath like a gentle lullaby for your body and mind. So, find a cozy spot, maybe snuggle under your blanket, and softly close your eyes. Now, breathing quietly through your nose for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath softly for 7 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now, slowly exhale through your mouth for 8 seconds, letting all the tension melt away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do that again. Nice and easy. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One last time, just like a soft whisper. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Feel your body getting lighter, your mind quiet, as if you're being tucked gently into a calm, warm bed. Thank you for sharing this moment with Sleepsmyth. Now, relax completely and let the story carry you into a peaceful, restful sleep. Let's begin.
Across the wide heart of Africa, the land breathes in color and memory. Forests hum with ancient whispers, shadows dancing across trunks and leaves that have witnessed centuries. Savannahs stretch like seas of gold, wind tracing the steps of ancestors. Deserts shimmer beneath endless skies, sand shifting like time itself. Rivers twist like ancient serpents, carrying stories, dreams, and the pulse of life. Here, a city is never only built. It is called forth, awakened by courage, vision, and the hands of those who dare to dream. Timbuktu. In the hush of desert edges and the shade of scattered forest groves, Buktu tended the sacred well, seeing not only water but the life it could hold. His patience, insight, and quiet devotion became the foundation of a city where knowledge and culture could bloom, rising from the sands like a promise made tangible. Kano. Amid tall grasses of the savannah and the sheltering canopy of distant trees, Bayajidda faced the serpent. Fire and fear intertwined in the struggle that would shape a kingdom. From his courage, law and kinship were forged, and a city was born, a place of strength, unity, and the enduring pulse of a people standing together. Carthage, where the sea kissed fertile plains, forests, and hills. Dido fled exile, carrying sorrow and hope across restless waters. On foreign shores, she shaped a sanctuary from sand, sweat, and unyielding resolve. Through love, loss, and sacrifice, she left a mark upon the earth. A city built not just of stone, but of vision, endurance, and a queen's indomitable heart. In jungles, grasslands, dunes, and shores, Africa holds the beginnings of cities in every leaf, every grain of sand, every curling wave. The land remembers, and in its memory, cities awaken, stories breathe, and the past flows into the present like sunlight sifting through leaves. Breathe slowly, listen to the wind over the plains, feel the pulse of the continent in its ceaseless song. The cities of Africa are alive with dreams, waiting to be heard, waiting to be felt, waiting to be remembered. Timbuktu, where Buktu watched the well. At the desert's edge stood water and a guardian, and from her keeping rose a place of caravans, learning, and legend. Nomads of the desert sea. Before there was a city, before there was even a name, the Sahara stretched unbroken, a sea of sand without shore. Day after day, the sun blazed down, a merciless fire above a world of shifting dunes. The horizon trembled with heat, and the air itself seemed alive, bending and shimmering until the desert looked like waves upon an endless ocean. Across this vastness moved the Tuareg people, wanderers who knew the secret paths of the sands. They traveled in caravans that wound slowly across the desert's back, camels rising and kneeling like ships upon waves. The camels bore salt carved from distant mines, ivory from forests far away, and goods that carried the touch of other lands. They wore flowing veils of indigo cloth, shielding their faces from burning winds, and their eyes were steady with the knowledge of generations. Each step across the sand was guided not by roads, but by memory, by stars traced carefully across the night sky, by a rock or hollow remembered from journeys past. Yet for all the weight of salt and ivory, for all the richness of goods, one treasure mattered more than all: water. A single drop upon the tongue meant life. A single well meant survival not only for the people, but for the beasts that carried them, for the trade that bound worlds together. In the desert, water was more precious than gold, more enduring than ivory, more sacred than salt. So when the Tuareg found a hollow in the sand where the earth yielded water, they gathered with relief as though they had found a miracle. They lowered their vessels into the dark opening, pulling them up heavy with cool water that glimmered in the sun. The camels drank deeply, their long necks bending again and again until their thirst was quieted. Children cupped the water in small hands, and though laughter rose, elders reminded them with quiet voices that water was never to be wasted. Around the well they built their camp. Tents rose like islands against the desert wind. Fires flickered low as the night approached, and the murmur of voices filled the air. When the stars unveiled themselves, brighter than torches, brighter than dreams, the well mirrored them, holding in its still surface the endless sky above. It seemed as though heaven and earth had met in that hollow, and the Tuareg, weary from their journey, felt a rare calm in their wandering lives. But caravans do not rest forever. The desert calls its people forward, the routes demand to be followed, and trade cannot linger in one place. Yet this well was too precious to leave unguarded, too sacred to abandon entirely. And so the Tuareg gathered and spoke. Someone must remain, someone must keep the well safe, someone must ensure its water would be waiting when the caravans returned. Their eyes turned to one among them, a woman of age and quiet strength. She was not merchant nor warrior, but her life had been long, and her presence steady. She was known as Buktu. To her, the guardianship was entrusted. She would remain, she would watch the well, she would be the keeper of life in this hollow of sand. From that decision, a name would be born. From that woman, a story would begin. And in time, a city would rise where once there was only desert, water, and one who kept watch. Timbuktu. Well of life. In the desert, water was more than refreshment. It was survival, blessing, and memory. Wells were never ordinary, for they held the power to decide life or death. When the Tuareg uncovered the hollow where water waited beneath the sand, they knew they had stumbled upon more than a pause in their journey. They had found a place where the desert itself seemed to soften, where the earth opened its hands and offered them life. Around this well, the people built their circle of tents. The camels knelt to drink until their long thirst was eased, their sides shuddering with relief. The women drew water in leather skins, lifting them from the dark mouth of the earth until they bulged heavy with promise. Men rinsed the grit of travel from their faces, letting cool streams trickle down their cheeks. Even the children, often hushed in the harshness of the desert, splashed their fingers in the edge of the water with quiet joy. When the sun fell, the well became a mirror of the stars. The people sat close to its edge, firelight flickering on their faces, while the surface reflected constellations that their ancestors had followed for generations. Each star was a guide, each star a companion, and now they seemed to rest upon the water itself, as if heaven and earth had touched in this single hollow of sand. Stories rose into the night, stories as essential to the Tuareg as water itself. They spoke of journeys carved into memory, of salt caravans winding through endless dunes, of the desert spirits who watched over wells and punished those who wasted their gifts. Elders told of how the earth gave water not freely but with purpose, how every well carried a lesson of gratitude and respect. Around that circle of fire and water, the Tuareg found more than relief for their bodies. They found a deepening of the bond that tied them to the desert, to one another, and to the unseen powers that governed both. Yet even as peace lingered, the truth of their life pressed upon them. Caravans could not remain in one place. Trade must continue, routes must be followed, and the desert was not a home of stillness but of movement. To abandon the well entirely would be to risk its loss, for a gift unguarded might vanish. It was agreed that the well must have a keeper, someone who would remain while others pressed onward. And so their eyes fell upon a woman whose name carried weight in their community. She was older than most, her life written in lines across her face, her presence steady even as the desert shifted endlessly around her. She was neither warrior nor merchant, yet her wisdom was unquestioned, her patience unbroken. She was Buktu. They entrusted the well to her care, and in doing so, bound her life to its waters. The caravans could move with lighter hearts, knowing that when they returned, the well would still be guarded, its water still flowing, its blessings still preserved. Buktu sat by the hollow as the stars turned above, her figure small against the immensity of the desert, yet her presence was the promise that the well would endure. It was a simple decision, one made by weary travelers in need of certainty. Yet from that moment, something larger began. A place was no longer nameless, no longer a mere pause in the journey. It was marked by the presence of a woman and her task. The well became Buktu's well, and in time, the world would know the name born from it, Timbuktu. The Guardian. When the caravans departed, their camels rising beneath the weight of salt and goods, a silence settled over the hollow. The fires were quenched, the tents folded, the voices that had once circled the well faded into distance. Only the wind remained, brushing over the dunes with its endless song, and at the center of it all sat Buktu. Her figure small, yet steadfast, beside the well that was now her charge. Day after day she kept watch. At dawn, the first light spread across the sand like a veil of gold, and Buktu leaned upon her staff, gazing out over the horizon. The desert, empty and vast, could seem endless, but she knew that paths stretched invisibly across it, paths that would one day bring the caravans back to her. She lowered vessels into the well, drawing up water to drink, giving thanks for each drop that cooled her lips. And though she was alone, she did not feel abandoned, for the well was company enough, a constant murmur beneath the earth that reminded her life still flowed in a place where life was scarce. Travelers came, for the desert is wide and its routes many. Strangers would appear at the edge of the dunes, their silhouettes shimmering in the heat, their camels weary, their skins dry and nearly empty. To them, Buktu offered water, for no soul could be turned away in a land where thirst was death. She lowered the vessel, drew up the clear water, and poured it into their hands, into their bowls, into the mouths of their beasts. And when they asked whose well this was, she answered with calm simplicity, "It is mine to keep. I am Buktu, guardian of this place." In this way, her name began to cling to the well. Traders spoke of it as they continued their journeys. The well watched by Buktu, the place where an old woman sat in quiet keeping, ensuring water was never lost to time or neglect. Stories spread from caravan to caravan, carried in voices across the desert, until the name of Buktu was known far beyond the hollow itself. The desert is not kind to solitude, yet Buktu endured it with patience. She watched the stars wheel through the heavens, listened to the winds shift the dunes, marked the seasons by the migrations of travelers. The well was her constant, a circle of stone and water that bound her life to something larger than herself. She was not rich, not powerful, not young, yet her guardianship gave her a place in the memory of the desert. And as the years passed, her role became legend. She was remembered not only as a woman, but as a symbol of guardianship, of the bond between people and the scarce waters of the Sahara. What began as a simple act of trust grew into something enduring. The well was no longer just a hollow in the sand. It was Buktu's well, and it would one day lend its syllables to a city that rose where desert and life met. Caravans returning. Seasons turned across the desert, though in the Sahara seasons were not marked by green and bloom, but by heat, by wind, by the coming and going of caravans. The sun still burned with the same relentless fire, the sand still shifted in endless dunes, but the lives of those who crossed it carried rhythm, a cycle of departure and return. For Buktu, the well was a constant. Each morning she lowered her vessel into the darkness, drawing up the water that glimmered cool against her weathered hands. She lived simply, watching the stars at night, feeding her fire when the air grew cold, welcoming strangers who arrived by chance from the horizon. Yet her solitude was never endless. Always, in time, the Tuareg caravans returned. From afar she would see them, a thin line across the dunes, figures swaying on camelback, the sound of bells faintly carried by the wind. They came as they always had, burdened with salt from the mines, with gold from the rivers of distant lands, with ivory and goods meant for faraway markets. Their camels bore the dust of many days, and their voices, once weary, grew brighter as they neared the well they knew would still be waiting. And there was Buktu, seated by the water, her staff resting against the stone, her eyes calm. She had not left her post, nor abandoned her charge. The well was as it had been, guarded, cared for, kept alive by her daily touch. When the travelers dismounted, when the camels bent their knees in thirst, when the vessels were lowered into the cool darkness, they gave thanks not only for the water, but for the woman who had ensured it endured. Around the fires, the people spoke of her with respect. They shared how she had welcomed strangers, how no traveler had been turned away, how she had given herself to the service of the well without complaint or demand. In the desert, where pride and strength were often measured by wealth or speed or endurance, Buktu's strength was of another kind. It was patience, humility, and unwavering care. As the caravans rested, stories moved outward once again. Traders carried word of the well and the woman who guarded it across the desert's vastness. Her name traveled with them to distant places, tied always to the gift of water, tied always to the well. And little by little, the place ceased to be nameless. It was known by those who returned to it, known by those who heard of it. They spoke of it as the well of Buktu, the place of Buktu, the water of Buktu. The caravans did not stay long. They never could. The road called them forward, their goods waiting for exchange in far-off lands. But each time they departed, they left knowing that Buktu would remain, watching, guarding, waiting, a small figure beside the well that had become more than water. It had become a promise, a center, a seed of permanence in a world of constant movement. And so, through her presence, the desert gained something new. A place not entirely fleeting, not entirely shifting, but anchored by a name, a memory, and a guardian. Buktu's well became a landmark of the Sahara, known to traders, to travelers, to strangers who sought water in the desert's endless sea of sand. Name taking root. The desert has no walls, no boundaries, no borders. Yet even within its vastness, places gain meaning through memory and story. What began as a hollow where water gathered, what began as a pause along the caravan's path, grew into more than a waypoint. For each traveler who drank from the well, for each caravan that stopped to rest, the name of Buktu became tied forever to the water she guarded. At first, it was spoken simply, "We will stop at Buktu's well." There is water where Buktu keeps watch. But the desert is a place where words carry far, carried by traders across dunes, repeated by strangers who never saw the woman herself. And so, slowly, the name took root. The place was no longer nameless. It was known. Buktu had given her presence, and in return the desert had given permanence to her name. Caravans returned again and again, and each time the stories grew. Some spoke of her generosity, how she welcomed strangers and shared what water there was without hesitation. Others spoke of her endurance, how she remained while the world moved, a figure of constancy in a land that knew only shifting sands. Her name was carried alongside goods of salt and ivory, alongside beads and gold, until distant places heard of it. Timbuktu, the well of Buktu, the place where water and watchfulness endured. The Tuareg, whose lives were built upon movement, began to circle this place more often. Traders sought it as a point of certainty, a place where thirst would always find relief. And with them came the beginnings of permanence. Small shelters began to appear, woven from palm and cloth, left standing between journeys. Merchants who once passed swiftly through began to linger a little longer, knowing that trade would always find its way to this well. Through it all, Buktu remained. Her days did not change, her task did not falter. Each dawn she drew water, each dusk she tended the fire, each night she sat beneath the stars as caravans arrived and departed. She never claimed ownership, never sought recognition, yet her name and the well had become inseparable. The desert, which seemed eternal in its silence, had quietly allowed something rare to grow. A seed of permanence, born not from walls or rulers, but from a woman's guardianship and a people's memory. From this root, something greater would rise, though neither Buktu nor the travelers could yet imagine its scale. For the place was no longer a mere resting point. It was a name, a landmark, a story, and in time it would become a city. Rise of a settlement. The Sahara had always been a land of movement. Tribes drifted like the dunes themselves, rising and falling with the winds, never bound to a single place. Yet around Buktu's well, something new began to take shape. Not swiftly, not suddenly, but with the slow patience of the desert itself. A rhythm of return turned into a habit, and a habit into permanence. Caravans knew they would find water here, and so their paths converged more often upon the hollow where the old woman kept watch. Each arrival brought noise and life, the groaning of camels kneeling in the sand, the laughter of children stretching their legs, the low hum of merchants bartering, the smell of spices carried from distant lands. And though the caravans always departed again, they left behind traces, a shelter, a tool, a memory woven into the place itself. At first there were only a few, small huts of woven reeds, mats left for shade, stones placed to mark where tents had stood. Then came traders who lingered longer than most, setting down their loads for days, even weeks, trusting that others would soon arrive with goods worth exchanging. Salt from the north, gold from the south, ivory from the forests, cloth from beyond the desert, all began to meet at this single well, for it was the promise of water that drew them, and it was the presence of Buktu that reassured them the well would endure. Voices multiplied. Markets rose in simple circles where goods were laid out upon mats. Strangers from faraway lands met here, their languages mingling, their customs mixing, their hands reaching for trade across differences of tongue and skin. The desert, once an emptiness to be crossed, became at this well a meeting place, a space where people lingered rather than fled. And still Buktu remained. She was no longer alone, for around her grew the beginnings of a settlement, yet she kept her task unchanged. She drew water, she shared it freely, she kept her watch as the desert shifted and as life began to gather around her. Those who came respected her still, knowing that without her keeping the well might have been forgotten, left to sand and silence. Slowly, huts became clusters, clusters became a village. Traders began to call it not merely Buktu's well, but Timbuktu, a name that passed from mouth to mouth, settling like roots into the desert floor. And though walls were not yet raised, though no grand structures marked the horizon, something had begun that could no longer be undone. A settlement had risen where once there was only a woman and a well. The Sahara remained vast, the winds still moved the dunes, the caravans still traveled onward. Yet now there was a place that endured in their absence, a place that waited, not only for their return, but for the centuries to come. Heart of caravans. The desert had always been a road without markers. Yet in time, one name became its compass: Timbuktu. From every direction, caravans bent their paths toward it, drawn by the certainty of water, the promise of trade, and the memory of Buktu, whose well had never failed them. Salt blocks were carried across endless dunes from the north, cut from the earth of Tagaza and Tagaza, glistening in the sun like pale treasure. From the south came gold, mined from rivers that flowed far beyond the desert's edge, grains and nuggets carried in leather pouches, guarded as though they were the sun itself made solid. Ivory curved like crescent moons, plucked from the forests where elephants roamed, and rich cloths dyed in colors that seemed to capture the very essence of earth and sky. All of it converged upon the settlement, until its markets swelled with life and its air rang with the music of exchange. Around the well that had once been tended by a single woman, tents blossomed like flowers after rain. Merchants called out their wares in voices both familiar and strange. Languages blended into a song of commerce: Arabic, Songhai, Tuareg, Mande, each syllable carrying the sound of distant lands, each phrase binding people together across the distances of desert and time. The city did not yet possess walls, but it possessed a heart, and that heart was trade. Here, wealth was not locked away but carried, exchanged, transformed. A block of salt might become a nugget of gold. A carved tusk might be traded for fine cloth. A story might be exchanged for another, and carried onward to lands far away. Timbuktu lived not only in goods, but in the flow of voices and the movement of people. And still the memory of Buktu lingered. Many said her spirit watched over the well, though her body had long passed into the sands. Others told that her name was not simply a name, but a blessing, that to drink at Timbuktu was to drink of endurance, of safety, of welcome in the desert's merciless expanse. Whether her figure still walked in the starlight, or whether she was only a tale, no caravan doubted her presence. Thus Timbuktu, once no more than a hollow in the sand, became the heart of the Sahara's great trade. The city that had been born of one woman's watchfulness now carried the lifeblood of entire kingdoms, binding together the north and the south, the desert and the river, the forest, and the sea. It was no longer only a name passed along caravan paths. It was a center, a pulse, a destination, the heart of caravans, where the desert itself seemed to gather in one place before flowing outward again. City of water and memory. Centuries passed, and the desert remained. The dunes still shifted beneath the winds, the caravans still moved across the horizon, and yet Timbuktu endured, no longer only a well, no longer only a gathering of tents, but a city spoken of across the world. Travelers from distant lands knew its name before they ever saw its walls, a name that carried with it the weight of gold and the promise of knowledge. But beneath the layers of trade and scholarship, beneath the stories of wealth and splendor, there remained the quiet seed of its origin. Buktu, the woman who kept the well, whose life was simple, whose task was humble, whose gift was constancy in a place where little endured. Her figure was long gone, her fire no longer burned at the edge of the hollow, yet her name remained the city's root. Even as scholars filled Timbuktu with manuscripts, copying words of philosophy, law, medicine, and faith. Even as rulers sought its wealth and poets praised its beauty. Even as merchants carried salt and gold through its gates, there lingered always the old story whispered by the people, that once there had been a woman, a guardian of water, who gave the desert a place of rest. And in her name, the city was born. Some said her spirit walked still among the wells, unseen yet felt, guiding hands that drew water, watching the travelers who paused for breath before continuing their journeys. Others believed her name itself was her immortality, carried across centuries by tongues that never knew her face but spoke of her with reverence. And some, sitting beneath the stars, believed that when they saw the first shimmer of dawn upon the dunes, they were seeing her memory rise again from the sand. Timbuktu became legend, a city of wealth, of knowledge, of crossroads where worlds converged. Yet behind the grandeur lay a truth both humble and enduring, that it began not with kings, not with conquerors, not with architects or armies. It began with a woman and her well, a figure small against the vastness of the Sahara, and yet strong enough that her presence seeded a city that the desert itself could not erase. And so, when the desert winds blow and the sand shifts across forgotten roads, the story remains. Timbuktu, the city of Buktu, the city of water and memory. The desert may consume walls, may bury markets, may silence caravans, but it cannot take away her name. For her name is written not in stone but in story, not in walls but in the hearts of those who carried it across centuries. Thus the city endures, as does her memory. Buktu, the woman of the well. Timbuktu, the city that rose from her watch. A legend eternal, held by the sands, sung by the stars, remembered by the endless desert night. Kano, City of the Seven-Headed Serpent. A tale of a hero from distant lands who faced a monstrous serpent and reshaped the destiny of a city. Arrival of the Stranger. Long ago, before Kano rose to glory, the city was small and fearful, its people living under the oppressive shadow of a terrible creature. The serpent of the city's well was no ordinary beast. It had 7 heads, each glimmering with scales as black as midnight and eyes that burned like coals. Every head guarded the waters fiercely, and none who approached could draw life from the well without risking death. For generations, the serpent had kept the people under its terror, forcing them to seek distant streams, carrying water through dusty plains and shadowed valleys, their daily life a careful balance of survival and fear. Mothers whispered prayers over the heads of their children, and elders offered charms at the well's edge, yet nothing could sway the beast from its domain. It was then that a stranger arrived. He came from lands far beyond the plains, traveling through forests and rivers, guided by instinct, courage, and whispers of the ancestors. His name was Bayajidda, a man whose presence seemed to radiate quiet strength. The people of Kano watched from their homes and rooftops as he approached, noting the calm in his stride, the determination in his gaze, and the fearless way he walked toward the cursed well. No one had dared confront the 7-headed serpent before. Yet Bayajidda moved forward without hesitation, carrying only a polished iron sword and a charm tied to his arm for protection, invoking the guidance of the ancestral spirits. As he reached the well, he observed the serpent carefully. The creature's heads moved independently, hissing and snapping, each one a deadly threat, yet the stranger's eyes were steady, calculating every motion. He studied the timing of the serpent's attacks, the way its heads twisted and turned, and he noticed its moments of vulnerability, brief though they were. With patience, skill, and careful observation, he waited for the perfect moment to strike, drawing strength from the unseen presence of the ancestors and the hope of the people who had long endured suffering. The people of Kano gathered at a safe distance, hearts pounding, watching in silence. Dust rose from the well's edge as the serpent thrashed, its venomous fangs glinting in the afternoon sun. Bayajidda remained poised, his hands firm on the sword's hilt, eyes fixed on the heads that hissed and lunged. He whispered no words, yet every motion was precise, every step deliberate, every heartbeat in rhythm with the serpent's movements. The city seemed to hold its breath, the wind stilled, the birds paused mid-flight, and the moment became suspended in tension and anticipation. Then, as the sun dipped lower and the sky blazed with fire-colored light, Bayajidda leapt. Steel met scale, and the battle began in earnest. 1 head, 2 heads, then 3. He struck with agility and strategy, never faltering. The serpent roared, a sound that shook the earth and echoed across the plains, yet the stranger's resolve never wavered. Each movement brought him closer to victory, each strike a step toward freeing the city from fear. Children clutched their mothers' hands, elders muttered prayers, and the city's fate teetered on the edge of legend and reality. By nightfall, the struggle would define the destiny of Kano, marking the beginning of a city's transformation. In that first encounter, Bayajidda's courage, skill, and the unseen guidance of ancestors set into motion a chain of events that would forever reshape the lives of the people. the flow of the rivers, and the story of a city that would rise from fear to greatness. The stranger who dared face the seven-headed serpent had arrived, and with him, the first threads of Kano's legend were woven into history. Battle at the Well. As the sun dipped behind the distant hills, casting long, trembling shadows over Kano, Bayajidda stood at the edge of the cursed well, his eyes fixed upon the monstrous seven-headed serpent that had long ruled the city. Each head hissed and writhed independently, tongues flickering like flames, eyes glinting with venomous intelligence. The air was thick with the metallic tang of danger, and the earth beneath the well trembled with the weight of the serpent's fury. The people of Kano gathered in silence, hidden behind walls and rooftops, their hearts a mixture of hope and fear, for they had waited generations for a hero to appear. Bayajidda's hands tightened on the hilt of his iron sword, and with a steady breath, he began his approach. Each step was deliberate, measured, and in rhythm with the serpent's movements. One head lunged, he dodged. Another struck, he parried with precision. The battle was not one of sheer strength alone, but of intelligence, skill, and patience, for the serpent's seven heads moved like shadows, unpredictable and relentless. Dust rose from the ground as he pivoted, swung, and struck, sparks flying where steel met scale, the air vibrating with the sound of the clash. He remembered the stories of the ancestors, whispered to him during his long journey, guiding his hands, sharpening his mind. "Observe, do not rush," the voices urged. Bayajidda's movements became a dance, each step calculated, each strike purposeful. The serpent hissed and thrashed, its seven heads coiling and striking, yet the stranger remained unflinching. Sweat beaded on his brow, and his muscles burned with exertion, but his resolve never wavered. The people of Kano, watching from the safety of distance, felt their hearts lift with each successful parry and each deft maneuver. Hope, long dormant, began to stir in their souls. As the battle continued, the serpent's heads began to falter. One by one, Bayajidda's skill and courage began to turn the tide. He struck with precise force, severing the venomous threat, each head falling into the dust with a hiss that echoed across the plains. The ground shivered beneath the impact, and the river of poison that had tainted the well began to settle, its hiss fading into silence. With the final head subdued, the city seemed to exhale collectively, a weight lifted from the shoulders of its people, a darkness receding with the last breath of the serpent. But the victory was not just physical. The act of confronting and defeating the seven-headed beast symbolized the end of fear that had bound the city for generations. Bayajidda had not only fought with strength, but with wisdom, cunning, and the guidance of ancestral spirits. He had demonstrated that courage, skill, and purpose could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. The people of Kano, emerging from their hiding, approached the well cautiously at first, then with growing confidence, drawing water once forbidden, their laughter and relief echoing across the city. In the aftermath, Bayajidda did not simply leave. He walked among the people, teaching them, guiding them, and sharing the lessons of courage, vigilance, and honor. The city had been transformed in one day, not merely by the defeat of a monstrous serpent, but by the arrival of a hero whose wisdom and valor had reshaped destiny itself. From that moment, the tale of Bayajidda and the seven-headed serpent became legend, a story to be whispered from generation to generation, and the first spark of Kano's rise as a great and enduring city was lit. Marriage to the princess and the promise of a kingdom. With the serpent defeated and the city of Kano freed from fear, the people emerged cautiously from their homes, their eyes wide with awe and gratitude. Mothers lifted children high to show them the hero who had saved them, and elders approached Bayajidda with bowed heads, offering words of respect and admiration. But the stranger's journey in Kano was far from over. For the city, though now liberated from the monstrous serpent, still lacked unity, guidance, and the promise of a lasting kingdom. It was in this moment of newfound freedom that the local princess, the daughter of the city's king, stepped forward. Her presence was regal and commanding, a beacon of grace and strength, and her eyes shone with intelligence and curiosity as she regarded the man who had performed what no one else dared attempt. The elders and the king's council recognized that Bayajidda was no ordinary man. His courage, wisdom, and the blessing of the ancestors marked him as a figure destined for greatness. They proposed that he unite with the princess, not merely in marriage, but in purpose, forging a bond that would combine heroism with royal lineage. Such a union would symbolize the city's triumph over fear and the establishment of a foundation for governance, stability, and future prosperity. Bayajidda, humble yet aware of his destiny, agreed, understanding that this marriage was more than personal, it was the promise of a kingdom. The ceremony was held near the very well where he had faced the seven-headed serpent. Adorned in garments of vibrant colors and symbols of Kano's people, the princess and Bayajidda were joined together before the assembled citizens. The air was filled with the sound of drums, the singing of songs that recounted the serpent's terror, and the triumph of courage over darkness. Smoke from ceremonial fires drifted toward the sky, mingling with the scent of incense and herbs that had been offered to honor the ancestors who had guided the hero's hand. The people cheered, their voices rising in unison, for they knew that the marriage was a promise not only of union but of leadership, protection, and the beginning of a new era. Through this union, Bayajidda gained more than a wife. He gained legitimacy in the eyes of Kano's people. The princess, wise and perceptive, became a partner in governance, advising on matters of diplomacy, trade, and justice. Together, they symbolized the harmony of courage and wisdom, heroism and royalty. Their bond reassured the citizens that the city, once terrorized and divided, would now be guided by a combination of divine favor, heroic strength, and royal lineage. The promise of a kingdom extended beyond marriage. Bayajidda's victory over the serpent was commemorated in songs, tales, and symbols, while the marriage cemented his role as a figure of authority and destiny. Together, the hero and the princess planned for the city's growth, the protection of its people, and the establishment of traditions that would endure for generations. Their story became intertwined with Kano itself, each action and decision laying the groundwork for the city's expansion, stability, and prosperity. Thus, from fear and oppression, Kano rose toward a new future, guided by the hero who had slain the serpent and united with the princess who embodied the city's wisdom and grace. Their marriage was not merely a celebration but a covenant, binding the people, the hero, and the city in a shared destiny that would shape the legacy of Kano for centuries to come. The hero's blade had conquered the serpent, but it was the union with the princess that forged the city's heart, giving it a foundation of courage, guidance, and enduring promise. Founding of the Hausa Kingdoms. With the serpent vanquished and the union between Bayajidda and the princess sealed, the city of Kano began to flourish. Yet, the tale of the hero was far from complete, for his destiny extended beyond the city itself. Bayajidda and the princess looked beyond the walls of Kano, envisioning a land united not by fear, but by justice, courage, and the guidance of ancestral wisdom. The hero, guided by the voices of the ancestors who had led him to this place, began to travel the plains and river valleys, teaching, advising, and establishing a structure for governance that would endure for generations. From their union, sons and daughters were born, each imbued with the strength and wisdom of Bayajidda and the royal blood of the princess. These children were destined to carry the legacy of Kano outward, spreading the principles of leadership, courage, and justice to neighboring lands. It was said that from this lineage arose the rulers of the 7 original Hausa city-states, each a reflection of the hero's guidance and the princess's wisdom. Through them, the story of Kano was no longer confined to a single city. It became the seed of a network of kingdoms, bound by common ancestry and a shared sense of destiny. Bayajidda's guidance was not merely in bloodlines. He also taught the people how to defend themselves, how to govern with fairness, and how to honor the spirits of the land. The plains and valleys resonated with the sounds of training, the rhythm of labor, and the chants of people learning to live free from fear. Kano itself became a model city, its walls repaired and strengthened, its markets thriving with trade, and its people empowered with knowledge. Villages and towns across the region began to align themselves with the principles established by the hero, forming the foundations of what would become the Hausa kingdoms. As the city's influence grew, so did its renown. Traders traveled from distant lands, bringing goods and knowledge, while travelers carried tales of the hero who had slain the 7-headed serpent, married the princess, and founded not only a city but a legacy of kingdoms. The rivers and roads that connected Kano to surrounding territories became arteries of commerce, culture, and diplomacy. Each new settlement established by Bayajidda's descendants bore a trace of the hero's spirit and the princess's wisdom, ensuring that the founding principles of justice, courage, and honor spread throughout the land. The people celebrated not just the victory over the serpent, but the creation of a structured society where governance, protection, and prosperity were intertwined. The hero's sword and the princess's counsel became symbols of the city's enduring strength, guiding decisions on trade, defense, and the succession of rulers. Even the distant Hausa city-states, founded by the hero's descendants, recognized Kano as the origin of their lineage, the place where destiny had first been shaped by courage and wisdom. In this way, the legend of Bayajidda was woven into the very fabric of the land. The founding of the Hausa kingdoms was not merely an act of expansion, it was the deliberate creation of order from chaos, a transformation from fear to governance, from despair to prosperity. Kano became a beacon, a city whose story inspired generations, a place where the memory of a hero, a princess, and their children guided the rise of kingdoms and the enduring strength of a people whose legacy would span centuries. Trials of leadership and legacy. As Kano grew into a thriving city and the foundations of the Hausa kingdoms were laid, the hero Bayajidda faced challenges that tested not his strength, but his wisdom and resolve. The city, once terrorized by the seven-headed serpent, now had markets bustling with traders, homes echoing with laughter, and streets filled with the rhythm of daily life. Yet prosperity brought new trials. Disputes arose among clans, disagreements flared over land, and ambitious voices questioned the authority of a man born in a distant land. Though Bayajidda had won hearts with courage, he now needed to lead with judgment, fairness, and foresight. The mantle of leadership weighed heavily upon him, for it was no longer a battle of steel but a struggle to unite a people under a just and enduring governance. The princess, wise and perceptive, stood by his side, offering counsel and insight. Together, they navigated conflicts among the citizens, resolving disputes with measured decisions that balanced tradition and innovation. Bayajidda's experience as a traveler and hero informed his judgments, while the princess's understanding of the city's heritage and royal lineage ensured that the people felt both respected and guided. Elders of Kano were consulted, young leaders trained, and the city began to develop a council that reflected both the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. This council, inspired by the hero's presence, became a cornerstone of governance, ensuring that power was not concentrated but shared among those who would protect the city and its people. Yet leadership was not without personal trials. Bayajidda's children grew, each showing signs of promise and ambition. He needed to prepare them to inherit not just a city, but an entire network of kingdoms. He trained them in diplomacy, combat, and the knowledge of the land, ensuring that they understood the weight of their lineage. At the same time, he reminded the people of the serpent's legacy, of the fear and darkness that once ruled the wells, teaching lessons of vigilance, courage, and respect for both human and natural forces. Every decision, every act of justice, and every lesson imparted became part of the enduring legacy of Kano, a city where heroism was inseparable from wisdom. Outside the city, rival regions watched with curiosity and caution. Stories of Bayajidda's deeds had traveled far: the seven-headed serpent, the marriage to the princess, and the founding of the Hausa kingdoms were tales that inspired both admiration and envy. Ambassadors came to Kano, seeking alliances or testing its strength, and the hero king responded with measured diplomacy. He taught his people to value strategy over brute force, negotiation over conflict, and unity over division. Under his guidance, Kano not only survived the challenges of leadership but thrived, its influence expanding through the careful nurturing of loyalty, respect, and honor. Through these trials, Bayajidda's legend deepened. The hero who had slain a monstrous serpent now proved himself a wise and enduring leader. His actions became teachings for generations, that courage alone was insufficient, that strength must be tempered by wisdom, and that a city's prosperity depended on both its people and its rulers acting in harmony. The people of Kano revered him not just for his heroism, but for the fairness, foresight, and guidance that allowed the city and the emerging Hausa kingdoms to flourish. And so the hero's journey continued, not with sword alone, but through the shaping of destiny, the nurturing of legacy, and the unyielding commitment to a city that had once trembled under the shadow of fear but now shone with hope and promise. expansion, and prosperity. With Kano secure under the guidance of Bayajidda and the wisdom of the princess, the city began to grow, its influence stretching across the plains and valleys that had once been shadowed by fear. Traders and artisans arrived, drawn by the promise of safety, fertile land, and wise leadership. The city's markets thrummed with life, colors and scents blending in a tapestry of abundance. Spices from distant lands mingled with grains of the fertile riverbanks. Fabrics dyed in brilliant hues hung from stalls alongside polished weapons and jewelry. Laughter and song filled the streets, replacing the fear that had once gripped the city. Yet this prosperity was not accidental. It was the result of careful planning, strategic alliances, and the enduring vigilance of a hero who had faced death itself and lived to guide his people. Beyond the city walls, the territories of the Hausa kingdoms flourished as well. Bayajidda's children, trained in governance and battle, spread outward to establish settlements, each a reflection of the values instilled by their father. Villages grew into towns, and towns into cities, each connected by roads and rivers, linked in trade and shared culture. The hero taught the importance of justice, of resolving disputes fairly, and of honoring both the ancestors and the natural world that sustained them. Temples and shrines were built to commemorate the guidance of spirits and to mark the milestones of human achievement. Kano became the jewel of this expanding network, a hub of commerce, diplomacy, and learning, admired by neighbors and travelers alike. The people of Kano worked together with newfound unity. Farmers tilled rich soil along the riverbanks, their crops abundant and thriving. Craftsmen molded clay and metal into vessels, ornaments, and tools. Musicians and storytellers recounted the hero's deeds, weaving his courage into the daily rhythm of life. Children grew up hearing tales of Bayajidda and the serpent, understanding that the city's present prosperity was born of struggle, courage, and the enduring guidance of their ancestors. Every stone of the city's walls, every path through its bustling markets, bore witness to a legacy that combined heroism, wisdom, and communal effort. Trade routes extended farther with each passing season, bringing exotic goods, ideas, and cultural practices to Kano and its sister cities. Diplomats and envoys from distant lands marveled at the hero who had tamed fear itself and built a city capable of influencing entire regions. Through strategic marriages, alliances, and the careful distribution of authority among his children and trusted counselors, Bayajidda ensured that Kano's prosperity would endure beyond his own lifetime. Wealth, however, was never pursued merely for comfort. It was a tool to strengthen the city, protect its people, and foster learning and culture. At night, when the sun dipped behind distant hills and the city glowed with the soft light of lanterns and fires, one could hear the melodies of celebration and gratitude. Citizens sang of the hero's journey, his marriage to the princess, the battles fought, and the foundations of the Hausa kingdoms. The air carried the scent of incense and the warmth of community, a city alive not only with wealth but with shared purpose, pride, and the knowledge that their destiny had been forged through courage, wisdom, and unity. Kano had transformed from a city of fear to a beacon of prosperity, a place where the memory of a stranger hero guided the growth of kingdoms, and where the legacy of Bayajidda's deeds would endure through generations yet unborn. Legacy of the Hero and the Princess. As years passed, the city of Kano stood transformed, no longer a place of fear but a thriving kingdom illuminated by courage, wisdom, and the enduring spirit of its founders. Bayajidda, the hero who had journeyed from distant lands, and the princess, whose lineage and insight had guided him, became more than leaders. They became symbols, living embodiments of the city's strength, unity, and destiny. The people revered them not only for their deeds, but for the principles they instilled: justice, vigilance, and respect for the ancestors who had guided their path. Stories of their triumph over the seven-headed serpent were etched into songs, poems, and daily conversation, serving as lessons for children and reminders for elders. The children of Bayajidda and the princess grew into wise and capable rulers in their own right, each carrying a fragment of their father's courage and their mother's insight. Sons and daughters ventured beyond the walls of Kano, establishing towns and kingdoms, spreading the ethos of justice, leadership, and courage instilled by their parents. Each settlement reflected the balance between heroism and wisdom that had defined the founding of Kano, creating a network of houses city-states connected not only by blood but by shared values and common destiny. The influence of Bayajidda's line ensured that the lessons learned from the serpent, the union with the princess, and the founding of the kingdom would resonate far beyond the original city, shaping the culture, governance, and traditions of generations to come. Bayajidda himself, though no longer engaged in battles, remained ever vigilant, walking the streets of Kano, observing the people, and offering guidance when needed. His presence inspired loyalty, courage, and resilience, while the princess oversaw the training of young leaders, the preservation of cultural practices, and the maintenance of alliances with neighboring regions. Together, they ensured that the city was not only safe and prosperous, but also wise, fair, and united. They celebrated festivals that commemorated their victory, honored the ancestors, and reinforced the values that had shaped Kano into a beacon of civilization. The legacy of the hero and the princess extended to architecture, culture, and ceremony. Walls were reinforced, gates rebuilt, and palaces adorned with carvings depicting the serpent and the hero's victory. Temples and shrines honored the ancestors and the divine guidance that had led Bayajidda to Kano. Music, dance, and storytelling became vessels of history, embedding the founding legend into the hearts of the people. Every child who listened to these tales learned not only of courage and adventure, but also of the responsibilities of leadership, the importance of justice, and the enduring influence of their ancestors. Even as time flowed and new generations rose, the story of Bayajidda and the princess remained ever present. Leaders invoked their wisdom when settling disputes, citizens recounted their deeds during celebrations, and travelers from distant lands marveled at the harmony and prosperity of Kano. The hero's sword, now enshrined, was not merely a symbol of battle, but a testament to the principles of courage tempered by wisdom. The princess's counsel endured as a standard for governance and fairness. Together, their legacy became inseparable from the city itself, a continuous thread weaving heroism, justice, and leadership into the very soul of Kano. Thus, the hero who had slain the seven-headed serpent and the princess who had guided him became eternal in memory and story. Their lives, intertwined with the city's rise, ensured that Kano would not only survive the trials of history, but flourish as a place of courage, wisdom, and enduring legacy. And in every song sung, every story told, and every celebration held in Kano, the people remembered that their city's greatness had been born of bravery, guided by insight, and preserved by the enduring principles of its legendary founders. Legacy carved in stone. As the years stretched into decades, Kano stood as a testament to the courage of a stranger, the wisdom of a princess, and the enduring spirit of a people transformed. Bayajidda, whose journey had begun in distant lands, had not only freed the city from the terror of the seven-headed serpent, but had also established a legacy that would ripple across generations. The hero's deeds were no longer mere stories of adventure. They had become the foundation upon which the city and its surrounding kingdoms thrived. The walls of Kano, once simple and unassuming, now rose tall and strong, their stones carrying the memory of battles fought, challenges overcome, and the spirit of a hero who had never faltered in the face of fear. The children of Bayajidda and the princess matured into rulers of their own realms, each bearing a fragment of the hero's courage and the princess's wisdom. They journeyed across the plains, forging alliances, settling disputes, and building towns that bore the mark of their lineage. Each settlement became a reflection of the founding principles of Kano: justice tempered with mercy, courage paired with wisdom, and leadership rooted in service to the people. Traders, scholars, and travelers came from distant lands to witness the cities born of this lineage, bringing with them stories, goods, and knowledge that further enriched the culture and influence of Kano. Yet the legend of Bayajidda endured not only through the achievements of his descendants, but through the very fabric of the city itself. Festivals celebrated the victory over the seven-headed serpent, and songs recounted the hero's journey from stranger to savior. Temples and shrines honored both the ancestors who had guided him and the divine protection that had accompanied his blade. Children learned to walk the streets with pride, understanding that they were heirs to a city whose greatness had been forged through courage, unity, and foresight. The name of Bayajidda became synonymous with heroism, integrity, and leadership, a constant reminder to the people that greatness arises not from power alone, but from courage, wisdom, and the bonds that tie a community together. Even as generations passed, the spirit of the hero lingered. Leaders invoked his guidance in times of challenge, elders retold his deeds to inspire, and every corner of Kano, from the bustling markets to the quiet riverbanks, echoed with the memory of the serpent defeated, the princess united, and the city reborn. The hero's sword enshrined in the palace, and the princess's counsel, remembered in council chambers, became enduring symbols, reminding each citizen that the city's strength was rooted in courage, justice, and collective resolve. The people of Kano understood that they were part of a living legend, a story that transcended time, binding them to their ancestors, their hero, and the enduring promise of their city. Thus, the tale of Bayajidda and the seven-headed serpent, the union with the wise princess, and the founding of Kano's enduring legacy became eternal. It was a story told beneath starlit skies, whispered through the corridors of the city, sung in markets, and honored in festivals. The hero's journey, the princess's wisdom, and the courage of the people became inseparable from the identity of Kano itself. Even centuries later, travelers, storytellers, and citizens alike would remember that the city's greatness had been forged in the crucible of fear, courage, and destiny, ensuring that the legend of Kano, born of a stranger, a serpent, and a princess, would endure forever, timeless, luminous, and eternal. Carthage, flames of a queen's resolve. In exile and grief, a queen's courage carved a city from the sands, and her heart shaped the destiny of empires yet to come. Dido's flight and arrival. In the ancient city of Tyre, a queen once ruled whose name would echo across time. Dido, beloved for her wisdom, her courage, and her unwavering resolve. Yet within the walls of her home, betrayal festered. Her brother, Pygmalion, greedy for the throne and blind to loyalty, plotted to claim power through deceit and cruelty. The city that had nurtured her, that had shaped her into a leader, became a place of danger and treachery. With the weight of exile pressing upon her heart, Dido made a choice. She would flee, carrying with her not only the memory of Tyre, but also the hope of forging a new destiny. Under the cover of night, she gathered her most loyal followers, supplies, and the wisdom of her people, and set sail upon the restless sea. The waters ahead were vast and uncertain, each wave a test of endurance, each gust of wind a reminder of the fragility of life. Dido stood at the bow of her ship, eyes fixed on the horizon, the moonlight glinting upon the crests of waves that seemed both threatening and inviting. Her heart ached with the knowledge of what she had left behind, yet it beat fiercely with resolve. The sailors rowed with steady rhythm, the oars cutting the sea in unison, carrying the queen and her followers toward a fate unknown. Stars stretched across the heavens, distant fires lighting the way, and the night whispered of both peril and possibility. Days and nights passed, the sea testing the courage of all aboard. Hunger, fatigue, and uncertainty shadowed their journey. Yet Dido's determination never faltered. Each morning, as the sun rose, it painted the waves with gold and crimson, a promise that the horizon held more than danger, it held hope. She spoke to her followers, offering reassurance and guidance, reminding them that the city they would build must rise not only from sand and stone, but from unity, courage, and vision. The memory of Tyre, of betrayal and loss, became the foundation for her resolve. A city built from exile would be stronger, wiser, and just. Finally, after days of relentless journeying, the distant outline of a coastline emerged, a stretch of fertile land bordered by gentle hills and hidden coves. Dido's heart lifted, and a quiet triumph filled the air. She stepped onto the sands, feeling the earth beneath her feet, envisioning streets, marketplaces, and walls that would shelter her people and their descendants. She surveyed the land with the eye of a ruler, recognizing both its promise and its challenges. Here, she declared, she would build a city that would endure, a sanctuary born of courage, vision, and the sacrifices of exile. As evening fell, Dido climbed a hill overlooking the nascent settlement. The ocean reflected the last light of the sun, and the stars began to glimmer, guiding her gaze toward distant possibilities. She spoke softly to her people, invoking the ancestors and the favor of the divine, pledging that their labor, courage, and loyalty would shape a city destined to be remembered across generations. Fires were lit to mark boundaries, tents were arranged, and a sense of purpose infused every heartbeat. In that moment, the first spark of Carthage flickered into life, a city of hope, of resilience, and of a queen's unyielding resolve. Hands shaping the shore. Dido stood upon the sands of her newfound land, the soft grains shifting beneath her feet, the sea whispering its eternal rhythm to the shore. The wind carried both promise and challenge, and she felt the weight of her responsibility settle upon her shoulders. Every glance at the hills, the coves, and the fertile plains revealed both the potential for a city and the work required to transform vision into reality. Her followers, inspired by her courage, gathered around, ready to heed her command. With unwavering resolve, Dido began the labor of founding Carthage, not as a mere settlement, but as a city that would endure, a sanctuary of strength and wisdom born from exile and hope. The work was immense. Stones were gathered from rocky outcrops, sand sifted to create firm foundations, and wooden frameworks erected to mark the streets and future dwellings. Dido moved among her people, her hands guiding, her voice instructing, teaching them to see beyond survival to the architecture of civilization. She showed them how to measure and level, how to select the strongest timbers, and how to arrange their labor so that each stone, each beam, and each dwelling would form part of a city built to last. The sun rose and fell, burning hot upon their backs, yet their hearts remained steadfast, fueled by the vision of a city that would carry their legacy across generations. Beyond the physical labor, Dido instilled a sense of purpose in every soul. She spoke of laws, justice, and governance, ensuring that the people understood their shared responsibility in creating not only a city, but a society. She organized councils, appointed trusted leaders, and encouraged the sharing of wisdom and skills. Craftsmen shaped pottery and tools. Farmers prepared the fertile soil for future crops, and builders erected shelters that would eventually become homes, temples, and marketplaces. Every action, every measured step, contributed to the living tapestry of Carthage, a city born of discipline, courage, and vision. At night, the city's first fires flickered against the darkened sky, casting long shadows across the sands. Dido would walk among her people, ensuring the fortifications were secure, the camps orderly, and the morale strong. She whispered words of encouragement and dedication, reminding them that each stone placed, each wall raised, was an act of defiance against exile and a testament to their resilience. The stars above reflected in the eyes of the workers, as though the heavens themselves were witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. As weeks turned into months, the settlement took form. Streets were laid with precision, homes clustered around communal spaces, and the first marketplaces began to hum with activity as the people's efforts bore visible fruit. Dido's vision expanded with each new milestone. The city was not only a refuge but a promise, a place where ambition, courage, and wisdom would flourish. She trained her people to respect both the land and one another, embedding principles of justice, cooperation, and foresight into the very foundations of the city. In the quiet moments, standing atop the hill overlooking her creation, Dido allowed herself a brief sigh, a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. From exile to creation, from sorrow to purpose, every stone she placed, every hand she guided, bore witness to her courage and determination. Carthage was no longer just a dream. It was becoming reality, a city shaped by hands that refused to surrender, and a queen whose vision would echo through centuries. The horizon glowed with possibility, the sands whispered of endurance, and the sea sang of journeys past and future alike, as the first true heartbeat of Carthage pulsed beneath the rising sun. Walls forged in courage. With the foundations of Carthage taking shape beneath the sun, Dido turned her attention to the walls that would protect her fledgling city. Not mere barriers of stone, but fortifications imbued with purpose. Each brick placed as a symbol of resilience, each tower rising as a testament to courage. Her people worked tirelessly, hands blistered and backs bent under the relentless heat. Yet their spirits were lifted by the determination reflected in their queen's eyes. Dido moved among them constantly, inspecting the walls, offering guidance, ensuring that every stone, every mortar joint was laid with care and precision. The walls themselves were more than practical structures. They were statements of intention, sentinels of security against both the known dangers of the land and the uncertainties that lay beyond the horizon. The stones were quarried from nearby hills, heavy and unyielding, transported by teams of laborers who sang songs of encouragement to sustain rhythm and morale. The sound of hammers striking chisels echoed across the coastline, mingling with the crash of waves and the distant cries of seabirds, as if the city itself were awakening to life beneath the sunlit sky. Dido also understood that courage alone would not sustain a city. She taught her people to organize watch posts, to maintain vigilance against any intruder, to anticipate threats and respond with unity and intelligence. Discipline became as important as labor, loyalty as vital as skill. The walls, once completed, would not only protect the people physically, but would symbolize the spirit of a community bound together by trust, purpose, and shared destiny. Each brick, each layer, carried the story of exile, the triumph over fear, and the hope for a prosperous future. Within these walls, Dido also established spaces for governance. Councils met under the shade of constructed halls. Decisions were made collectively, disputes resolved through reason and fairness. She instilled values that would define Carthage for generations: justice tempered with wisdom, courage paired with foresight, and leadership rooted in service to the people. The very act of building became a form of education. Every worker, every craftsman, every child who observed learned the principles that would guide their city long after their hands had rested. As the sun set each day, the walls gleamed in the warm light, casting long, proud shadows across the sands. Dido would climb the tallest towers, surveying the city's progress, feeling both satisfaction and vigilance. For though the stones could protect against swords and arrows, the true strength of Carthage would always lie in its people, their hearts and minds, their loyalty and courage, the unity that Dido nurtured among them. She reminded herself constantly that these walls were not just barriers. They were the backbone of a civilization yet to rise, a monument to vision and endurance. And so day after day the city grew, the walls stretching higher, the streets taking shape within their embrace, a promise of protection, of identity, and of a queen's indomitable spirit. The laborers sang, the hammers struck, and the walls rose, not only from stone and mortar, but from the courage and hope of all who had followed Dido across the treacherous seas. Carthage was no longer merely a dream upon the sand. It was becoming a living, breathing city, ready to endure the challenges of fate, war, and the passage of time. markets of gold and promise. As Carthage's walls rose proudly against the horizon, the city began to hum with life. The labor of stones and timber gave way to the rhythms of trade and the exchange of goods. From dawn until dusk, merchants set up stalls along the winding streets, calling out the value of spices, fabrics, and rare treasures brought from distant lands. The air was alive with the scent of exotic incense, the glitter of metals, and the warmth of freshly baked bread. Every coin exchanged, every handshake, every trade became a stitch in the fabric of a city rising toward prosperity. Dido watched over these markets with quiet satisfaction. She understood that the heartbeat of a city was not only in its walls, but in the vibrancy of its commerce. Each trader brought more than goods. They brought knowledge, connections, and the promise of alliances that would strengthen Carthage's influence across the Mediterranean. Craftsmen displayed pottery, jewelry, and tools, their skill reflecting both tradition and innovation. Farmers offered fruits, grains, and livestock, ensuring that the city's people were nourished and thriving. And Dido encouraged them all to see the market as more than a place of exchange. It was a place of opportunity, a space where culture, ideas, and prosperity converged. The queen also recognized the importance of regulation and fairness. She appointed trusted officials to oversee transactions, to ensure that trade remained honest, that disputes were resolved swiftly, and that every citizen, from merchant to laborer, understood the value of cooperation and trust. Carthage was becoming a city where commerce was not merely about wealth. It was about community, about relationships built on integrity and vision. The markets reflected the city's spirit, energetic, ambitious, and alive with possibility. Beyond the exchange of goods, the markets became spaces of learning and celebration. Storytellers recounted tales from distant lands. Musicians played melodies that stirred both joy and reflection. Children watched wide-eyed as artisans demonstrated their craft, absorbing the skill and creativity that would shape the next generation. Scholars, travelers, and messengers brought news, ideas, and innovations. And Dido encouraged dialogue, understanding that knowledge and commerce together would secure Carthage's enduring prosperity. Evenings in the markets were magical. Lanterns flickered in the gentle breeze, casting soft light upon the stalls. The chatter of traders and laughter of children mingled with the sound of waves from the nearby sea. Dido often walked among the people, observing their interactions, listening to their dreams and concerns, and offering guidance when needed. Her presence reassured the citizens, a living symbol that their queen's vision extended beyond the walls, that the city's growth and success depended upon every individual's contribution. Through careful planning, steadfast leadership, and the tireless efforts of her people, Carthage began to flourish. The markets became the lifeblood of the city, a tangible sign that Dido's vision was coming to life. From the smallest stall to the grandest merchant's hall, every corner of the city vibrated with promise, and every sunset reflected upon the bustling streets reminded Dido that the dream she carried across the sea was now tangible. A city built not only from stone and sand, but from hope, ambition, and the enduring spirit of its people. Alliances and ambitions. As Carthage thrived with bustling markets and streets filled with life, Dido turned her gaze beyond the city walls. The lands surrounding her new kingdom held both promise and uncertainty. Tribes and neighboring peoples roamed the plains and hills, some curious, some wary. And Dido understood that the survival and growth of Carthage depended not only on walls and markets, but on alliances forged with wisdom and care. She summoned her trusted advisors and envoys, and together they devised strategies to engage with the local tribes, seeking understanding, negotiation, and the possibility of cooperation rather than conflict. The queen's approach was measured and deliberate. She met with tribal leaders beneath the shade of ancient trees, offering gifts, words of respect, and assurances of peace. Her presence carried both authority and empathy, each gesture carefully designed to inspire trust. She spoke of shared prosperity, of common defense, and of the promise that Carthage could be a partner rather than a conqueror. Many of the tribes responded favorably, drawn to her charisma and vision. Yet some remained cautious, wary of outsiders and the power that Dido's city might wield. She understood that patience, diplomacy, and the careful balance of power would determine the city's future. Meanwhile, Dido worked tirelessly to strengthen Carthage internally. She trained her people in governance and negotiation, assigning leaders to oversee trade, defense, and cultural affairs. Every alliance she pursued required a city capable of sustaining trust, providing stability, and projecting strength. The walls, the markets, and the institutions she had established became symbols of reliability and security, each contributing to the perception of Carthage as a city worthy of respect and collaboration. Beyond diplomacy, Dido also cultivated strategic marriages, shared festivals, and joint projects that intertwined Carthage with neighboring communities. These efforts created bonds of kinship, friendship, and mutual benefit, enabling Carthage to expand its influence without resorting to force. The queen understood that power built through collaboration and loyalty would endure longer than power imposed through fear or coercion. Each handshake, each treaty, and each shared harvest reinforced the city's growing reputation as a center of prosperity, culture, and strategic acumen. At night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Dido would climb the city's tallest tower, gazing over both the walls and the surrounding lands, imagining the future alliances that would secure Carthage's position for generations. She reflected on the balance of ambition and caution, recognizing that the city's destiny depended not solely on her own decisions, but on the hearts and minds of those who had followed her from exile. Her resolve was steadfast, the foundation of alliances as carefully constructed as the walls she had built. Through diplomacy, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to her people, Dido ensured that Carthage would not only survive but flourish. The city became a beacon of stability, ambition, and strategic intelligence, its influence stretching across the surrounding lands, and every day brought new opportunities, new partnerships, and new challenges. All of it under the guidance of a queen whose vision extended far beyond the horizon, shaping a kingdom that would endure in history and legend alike. Love and the Fated Stranger. As Carthage flourished under Dido's leadership, destiny brought a new presence to the city. Aeneas, the Trojan hero, arrived upon her shores, weary from his long journey, carrying both sorrow and the weight of prophecy. His arrival stirred curiosity among the people, and a quiet tension took root within Dido's heart. For though she had built a city from exile and sorrow, her spirit had room for companionship, and yet she sensed the pull of fate intertwined with this stranger, a force neither she nor Aeneas could fully command. Dido welcomed Aeneas with hospitality and grace, providing shelter and sustenance. She listened to tales of his homeland, of Troy's destruction, and of the long journey that had brought him to her shores. His presence was both comforting and unsettling, a reminder that even in triumph, life carried new challenges. As days passed, admiration blossomed into affection. Their conversations deepened, their shared visions for a prosperous city intertwining with personal connection. Carthage became more than walls and markets. It became a space where hearts could meet, where destiny and desire collided. The people of Carthage noticed the bond forming between queen and hero. Traders, artisans, and elders observed the light in Dido's eyes, the subtle gestures of attention and care between the two. Carthage, already a city of ambition and hope, now felt the hum of a deeper, more intimate energy. Love had entered alongside labor and governance, and with it, the promise of joy and the peril of heartbreak. Dido's advisors cautioned patience, reminding her of Aeneas's purpose and the prophecies that followed him. Yet the queen's heart held both hope and reluctance, a duality she could not fully reconcile. Aeneas, too, was caught between duty and desire. His journey was foretold by the gods, a destiny to found a new people in lands yet unseen. And yet, he felt the warmth of Carthage, the loyalty of its citizens, and the intensity of Dido's presence. The city became a backdrop for both political maneuvering and personal intimacy. Every walk along the beaches, every evening spent atop the city walls, carried both tenderness and tension. Their bond was a quiet rebellion against fate itself, a fleeting moment of human connection in the shadow of prophecy. As weeks turned into months, Carthage thrived around them. The city's markets, walls, and alliances grew stronger. Yet within the heart of the queen, the knowledge of destiny's weight remained. She sensed that Aeneas's journey was not her own, that the love they shared, though profound, might be fleeting. Still, she nurtured the connection, cherishing the moments of laughter, conversation, and mutual respect. The city, now infused with both ambition and affection, reflected the complex balance of life, where duty, love, and destiny could coexist, even if only temporarily. The people of Carthage learned from this union as well. They saw that their queen, a figure of unmatched courage and vision, could also feel deeply. That love and leadership were not mutually exclusive, that the heart could guide as well as the mind. And as the sun set upon the city, casting golden light across the walls and markets, Dido and Aeneas stood together, brief solace against the tide of prophecy, united in a moment that would leave lasting echoes in the story of Carthage. Tides of betrayal. The warmth of companionship between Dido and Aeneas could not last forever, for the threads of destiny, woven long before their meeting, tugged relentlessly at the Trojan hero. Messages from the gods reached him, subtle yet insistent, reminding him of the task that had guided his life since the fall of Troy. Aeneas's heart ached with the duality of desire and duty, the pull of love for Dido on one side, the inexorable call of fate on the other. Each morning, as the sun gilded the walls of Carthage, he wrestled with the knowledge that his journey was not yet complete. Dido, unaware of the divine insistence guiding Aeneas, felt the first tremors of unease, small hesitations, fleeting glances toward the sea, moments when his thoughts seemed elsewhere. Yet she held hope that love could alter destiny, that her city, her loyalty, and her heart could anchor him to Carthage. She continued to govern, to fortify alliances, and to nurture the city's prosperity. Yet beneath her resolve lay a quiet storm of suspicion, fear, and unspoken dread. Every marketplace, every council, every sunset reminded her that happiness was delicate, fragile, and not entirely within her control. When the moment came for Aeneas to depart, the city itself seemed to shudder. Winds shifted, waves crashed more insistently upon the shore, and the people, sensing the queen's sorrow, whispered prayers and hopes for protection. Dido confronted the inevitable, her heart breaking with each step that took Aeneas closer to the horizon. The hero, torn between devotion to the queen and obedience to divine command, struggled to explain, to justify, to promise that fate need not be cruel. Yet the god's decree was unwavering, and the sea claimed his departure. Leaving Dido standing upon the sands, her vision of love entwined with destiny now fractured. Grief and betrayal surged through her veins. Not merely personal sorrow, but the anguish of a queen whose city's future had been intertwined with the presence of another. Carthage, though strong in walls and prosperity, felt the absence keenly. The markets carried a hushed tension, the streets whispered of loss, and every corner of the city reminded Dido of what might have been. She walked the walls at night, gazing at the horizon where Aeneas had vanished, the moon reflecting upon the restless waves, and felt the weight of both personal heartbreak and sovereign responsibility. Yet from this pain, Dido's resolve crystallized. She understood that the city she had built would endure beyond personal sorrow, that her people required strength, clarity, and leadership. She redirected her grief into action, fortifying alliances, overseeing markets, and ensuring that Carthage remained prosperous. The betrayal of love became a crucible in which her courage and wisdom were tested and strengthened. Each wall, each street, each stone of Carthage now carried the memory of both love and loss, a reminder that destiny, though often cruel, could not diminish the endurance of a queen's vision. As the days passed, Dido accepted the truth with measured sorrow. The tides of betrayal, both literal and metaphorical, reshaped her understanding of power, sacrifice, and legacy. Carthage, rising from these trials, became not only a city of stone and commerce but a monument to resilience. To a queen whose heart had been broken yet whose vision remained unshaken. The story of Aeneas and Dido, of love interrupted by fate, became woven into the very soul of the city, a reminder that greatness often arises from both triumph and tragedy. Ashes of a Queen's Heart. The sun rose over Carthage with a quiet brilliance, yet within the queen's chambers, a storm of sorrow and resolve brewed. Dido's heart, once filled with hope and love, now carried the weight of loss. The absence of Aeneas leaving an ache that no triumph or achievement could fully soothe. She walked among the streets of her city, observing the markets, the walls, the people whose lives had grown in harmony with her vision. Yet each smile, each bustling trade, reminded her of what had been stolen by fate. Dido understood that her story, intertwined with love and betrayal, could not end quietly. Carthage demanded a queen's final act to solidify its place in history. She climbed the hill overlooking the city, carrying with her the rituals of her people. Firewood stacked carefully, symbols of devotion and legacy prepared. Each step echoed with both determination and sorrow. The wind carried whispers of the past, of Tyre, of exile, of love lost, and of the promise that her people's city must endure beyond her own mortal life. As she prepared, the citizens remained unaware of the depth of her grief. They saw a queen overseeing her city, a figure of strength and guidance. Yet the quiet of her chambers and the solemnity of her ritual revealed the intersection of personal despair and sovereign duty. Dido's hands moved with precision, arranging each element. The flames to be kindled, the prayers to be spoken. Her mind wandered to Aeneas, to the warmth of shared days, to the possibility that love might have rewritten destiny. But fate, inexorable and absolute, had other plans. With a final glance over Carthage, Dido whispered words of farewell to the city, to the life she had built, and to the memory of love. The fire rose, bright and consuming, and in that blaze, the essence of a queen's courage, heartbreak, and vision transformed into legend. Carthage, standing upon the sands, witnessed the merging of grief and glory. Every wall, every street, every stone now carried the imprint of sacrifice, of ambition and sorrow, a queen's heart both broken and immortalized. The city's citizens, though unaware in the moment, would inherit a legacy forged in fire. Carthage's streets would thrive with trade, its walls would withstand assaults, its people would prosper under governance shaped by wisdom and vision. And the memory of Dido, her trials, and her courage would be woven into the stories recounted for generations. Her ashes, mingled with the winds of the coast, became part of the very soil of Carthage, a reminder that the birth of a city often demands the deepest sacrifices. Even as the flames subsided, the impact of her life and death resonated through Carthage. Traders, laborers, and children walked the streets unaware of the queen's final act. Yet the city itself, vibrant and enduring, bore witness to the power of determination, vision, and the shaping of destiny through courage and loss. Dido's story would echo in every corner, every marketplace, every fortified wall, a reminder that greatness often rises from the ashes of heartbreak, and that the heart of a queen, though broken, could shape the destiny of a civilization.